Welcome back to my channel. I'm Joe with Smokin Joe's Pit Barbecue. On today's video, I'm going to be cooking up a low and slow Texas style brisket. Stay tuned. All right, before I get started on this brisket, I do want to mention that this is a collaboration with Thiron from TNT Barbecue. I gotta tell you, if you guys aren't subscribed to his channel, please subscribe to his channel. I will leave a link inside the description box and also at the end of this video. Now, if you're into catering, Thiron is your guy. He cooks a mean brisket. He does a lot of pork loin, a lot of ribs, a lot of pork. I gotta tell you, subscribe to his channel. Check him out. All right, so here's the brisket we're gonna be using for this cook. This is a 14.5 USDA prime brisket, and I'm gonna go through the entire process of trimming and what I do to make it a Texas style. All right, so one of the first things before I get to trimming on this brisket is I just like to look it over to see what I'm up against, okay? And really look at it and see where I'm gonna focus the majority of my attention. It looks like on that fat cap, okay? It has very little fat on this top side. In fact, some of this is already loose. So obviously having a nice sharp knife helps a ton. I am using my Dow Strong 6-inch boning knife. So I just like to focus on this fat and trim the majority of it off. So I just like to focus on the heavier pieces of fat on the brisket and some of the heavy silver skin as well, okay? Now this brisket was sitting in my fridge for 2 days thawing out, and it's still kind of frozen in the middle, and that's what you want. It's a lot easier to trim a brisket that's partially frozen than completely thawed out or at room temperature. I like to lift it up with my hand and just trim away some of the fat and the silver skin as well. Okay, here's the decal fat right here. And what I like to do is just take the majority of that off. And one thing you want to do to your brisket is try to make it aerodynamic, okay? A little bit more of this decal. Okay, that looks good. Now on the top of this point, this brisket is a little bit too pointy for my taste, okay? So I'm gonna round this out a little bit. Got this fat down here that's hanging. I'm gonna remove that as well. But once I get to that fat cap, okay? So just grab your fillet knife and round off this big chunk of fat, a little bit of meat, okay? You don't want any sharp edges on your brisket because that will burn when it's inside the smoker. So let me show you guys this side here. You can just round it off, just like that. See that? Now our brisket is nice and round. All right, the other thing I like to do is trim up this entire edge, just like this, and expose that fresh meat. Okay, just like that. That we have a nice fresh edge that you're starting with right here. Okay, same thing in the front, but I'm not going to trim that because I'm going to be trimming this off to round it off. Okay, so I got my brisket turned around. Same thing. Let's get a nice fresh edge. Let's turn this brisket around and focus on this fat cap for a little bit. All right, so I'm just gonna trim a little bit of this fat. It's not too thick. Anytime I see dark spots like this on our brisket. I just want to clean that up a little bit, okay? Just expose that nice white fat. So on this part of the brisket, the fat gets pretty thick, okay? So I just want to look at it and realize that, okay, well, I probably need to take 1/4 inch off of this fat cap. Not a whole lot. Just clean it up. Okay, clean up this point. Remember, keeping in mind that you want to round it off, okay? So I am going to remove this piece right here because that's just going to burn. It was already like this, so might as well just remove it. I'm going to turn it back around. Now we need to round these corners off, okay? Now this side is pretty thick, but I do want to round it off. So just grab your fillet knife and trim it just like this, and trim both sides. Just draw an outline. Make sure that's what you want. Okay, so that looks good to me. So just take your knife and follow that line and round off your brisket. Same thing on this side. Okay, just like that. So that's about as much trimming as I want to do on this brisket. So I'm just going to wash up my hands and we'll be right back. All right, let's season this Texas style brisket. So I'm starting with 1/2 cup of black pepper. This is 16 mesh black pepper. There's my 1/2 cup. And 1/3 cup of kosher salt. All right, just like that, we're gonna mix this up real quick. Shaking it really good. All right, so I'm gonna be using mustard as a binder. You can use olive oil, but I like to use mustard, as you guys know. I think it really grabs a hold of the rub, and it creates a really nice bark on your briskets, okay? So just rub the entire brisket down, get all your edges as well. So now we just got to apply a rub, and you can go as heavy as you want. Okay, this is a big piece of meat. And I plan to use all of this rub, okay? Pat it down. So I did place my brisket on this aluminum tray, and I am using this cooling rack right here, and the reason I do that is because that nice cold air inside the refrigerator is really going to circulate throughout this entire brisket. The salt is going to draw out the moisture, and that nice cold air in the fridge is going to dry up that moisture in the brisket. So I'm going to wake up really early tomorrow morning, fire up my Yoda Frontiersman. I think Thyron's using Old Rusty. That's a heck of a smoker that he's got. We'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Stay tuned. All right, it's the very next morning, and I've got my Frontiersman fired up. Currently running at 225 degrees, but I am aiming for 250 degrees. Now to start my firebox, I did start with charcoal, just a bed of charcoal and 1 small split of wood. I normally start with either a large split of wood or 2 splits of wood. This time, because I am smoking at a low temperature, I only started with 1 split of wood. So let's go ahead and open up the door and put our brisket on. This brisket is going on the left side, with the point facing towards that firebox and the fat cap pointed down, okay? I know there's a big argument, fat cap down or fat cap up. Well, on my Frontiersman, I do have my tuning plates on, which means the majority of my heat is coming from the bottom, not the top, okay? So there's our brisket. Now I'm not gonna open this for at least 2.5 hours. At that point, we'll come back and check on it. Stay tuned. All right, so 2.5 hours into the cook, let's take a look at our brisket and see if it's time to spritz. Slide the shelf out so you guys can see that. Oh yeah. So that rub is definitely set. Okay, you can tell just by looking at it. Looks kind of dry on the surface. So I'm going to be spritzing with apple cider vinegar and water. Just a 50-50 mixture. And you want to spritz often and as frequently as possible. Okay, I recommend every 30 minutes you come outside and spritz your brisket. The reason why you want to spritz so much is because the moisture on the surface of the brisket helps develop that bark. You got to remember that smoke sticks to any wet surface, and that's what you want right there. Now when I go hot and fast, I usually wrap the brisket at 4 hours. I'm 2.5 hours in. I will come back and check in an hour and a half and see what the bark looks like. I don't anticipate that it's going to be time to wrap at that point. I'm thinking we're going to have to go 5 hours probably. So just continue to spritz just like that. Now you don't want to spritz really close either because you're going to remove that rub. So I'm going to come back in an hour and a half. We'll take a look at the bark and see if we need to wrap at that point. Stay tuned. All right, so it's been 4 hours. Now this is a time that I would normally wrap a brisket if I was cooking it hot and fast, right at the 4-hour mark. And at that time I usually have a really nice bark. Right now I'm still about an hour and a half, I want to say. I still don't have the color that I want, but I am going to be spritzing again. I want to get a little bit more color before I wrap this brisket, okay? Again, I anticipated this because this is a low and slow brisket, 250 degrees. I normally smoke my briskets between 275 and 300 on a hot and fast cook. Okay. All right, gonna slide the shelf back in and close the door. Check back about another hour and a half. Stay tuned. All right, so it's been 5.5 hours. Let's take a look at our brisket. Oh yeah. So that's the color that I'm looking for right there. So at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it in butcher paper. All right, so I am using my Magna Chef gloves right here. These are the best invention ever. It's got a magnet right here. Just put your gloves together and push up, and it locks the gloves together so you can pull your hands out, okay? So I'm just gonna grab this brisket, and I've got my butcher paper right here. Look at this beautiful brisket. All right, I've got the brisket wrapped up in my butcher paper, and the fat cap is still down. This is the point right here. And just in case you were wondering, the internal temperature on that brisket is 173 degrees, okay? This is the first time that I actually get an internal temperature, and it's right where I expected it to be. So we'll come back and check on it in a couple of hours, get an internal temperature. Stay tuned. All right, so the brisket is ready, and I gotta tell you, it took a little bit longer than expected. I had a little bit of bad weather outside. It got extremely windy and extremely cold. So it started messing with my temps inside my smoker. In fact, I was predicting that the brisket was gonna be ready in about 9 hours, and the total cook time was 10.5 hours. So at the 9th hour, the temperature of the point was about 197, okay? About to hit that 200 degrees. I come inside for about an hour, it's extremely windy. I come and probe the point, and it dropped 10 degrees on me. So what happens when the temperature drops like that from 197 to about 187, and then you bring it back up, is the brisket can tighten up on you, okay? So I'm not gonna be happy with this brisket. I mean, maybe it's gonna be the best brisket I've ever smoked, but it's probably not gonna be. I'm anticipating that this brisket is gonna be pretty tight. So let's take a look at it. It has been resting on my counter for about 45 minutes, okay? So let's take a look at it. It's plenty juicy, okay, but I think it's gonna be pretty tight, so we'll see. Okay, not a bad looking brisket. Let me move this tray aside. All right, so again, it's a solid looking brisket, but I think it's gonna be a little too tight, but we'll see. I'm gonna slice into this. All right, nice straight slices, just like this. There's no need to turn your brisket or anything like that. A properly cooked brisket is gonna slice nice and tender, nice and straight, okay? Well, it's slicing good, but we'll see. I like to cut these end pieces a little thinner, and then I will get to the pencil thick slices right around here, okay? Got a good smoke ring. Okay, let's check out a slice. Hopefully it's not extremely tight, okay? Actually, it's not bad, okay? Nice little hang test on there. Let's see the pull test. Yeah, see, this is what I mean. It did tighten up. I mean, it does pull apart fairly easy, but this is a little tighter than what I would normally like my briskets. But it does pull apart pretty tender, okay? Look at this. It's just a little bit tight, not too bad. But that's what that cold weather will do, okay? Unfortunately, this happened. I mean, this is still gonna be a really good brisket. I mean, you guys have seen me cook a ton of briskets, and this brisket smells absolutely delicious. It's just gonna be a little bit tighter than what I normally cook, okay? I was thinking of not even posting this video because I knew what had happened to this poor brisket with that temperature drop that way. So the pit temperature did come down as well. I was smoking to 250 degrees and it went down all the way to 200 degrees in a matter of minutes, okay? That's how windy it was outside. Probably 40-mile-an-hour winds, it's kind of crazy. And the wind was blowing right through my firebox and out the exhaust. But again, this is gonna be a pretty good brisket still, okay? So I'm just gonna turn it, take some slices off of our point right here. All right, so this point is extremely tender and this looks really good. So I'm happy with this right here. Look at that, nice and juicy. So I was really thinking about not posting this video, but I can't leave my brother Thyron hanging like this. And besides, you know, this kind of stuff happens, you know, it doesn't always work out exactly the way you want it to. Had a little bit of bad weather and that kind of changed our cook a little bit, okay? But again, it's not too bad of a brisket. I'm sure it's gonna taste really good. Okay, so look at that. Nice and juicy point. Let me pull a slice, okay? Look at that, it's nice and juicy, okay? It is a little tight, but you know, it's not bad. I mean, just a little tight, okay? So let's give it a taste. Stay tuned. All right, let's see how we did on our brisket. I'm gonna give this a taste. Just grab a slice. And you know what, it's not dry, okay? Just gonna pull a little piece off. There we go. All right, so as far as the flavor of this brisket, it's fantastic, okay? It's a true Texas brisket, salt and pepper only, has a really good flavor to it. Let's give this point a try. Look at this, nice and juicy as well. I'm gonna grab this barky piece right here at the end. Take some of this fat off. Here we go. I gotta tell you, this point is really tasty. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, we did have a few hiccups with the weather, and I think that tightened up my brisket. You know, this is definitely not the best brisket that I've ever smoked, but I did want to show you guys that this kind of stuff happens. As far as the flavor, this brisket is really good, but this is not my best brisket, okay? On a scale of 1 to 10, I give this one a 6, and mainly because the flavor is still there, okay? I like my brisket slices, as far as from the flat, a little bit more tender than this, and I like for them to pull a little bit easier than what this brisket is pulling. Don't forget to check out Thyron from T&T Barbecue. I'm gonna leave a link up here, I believe, so you guys can check out his channel. Check out the links below. Again, guys, I wanted to show you guys that not every brisket cook is a home run. This kind of stuff happens even to me. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button. And if you have any questions, leave them down below. Until next time, Joe with Smokin Joe's Pit Barbecue. See ya.